All right, moving into our final lesson in this module, we're going to look at what is vManage, what are the different dashboard panes that we see within vManage, how do we access devices in the overlay network through our vManage interface, and then finally, how do we monitor those devices by using the devices in the dashboards in vManage. So the first thing you're going to do is, you, of course, log into the platform and you connect to the vManage NMS through kind of just a standard HTTPS connection. And the default username and password in this particular case is admin and admin, but obviously you'd probably want to change that, but that's the default. Once you get in, you're going to see kind of your overall dashboard. And there are 11 different panes that exist in this dashboard. There's a device pane, there's a reboot pane, a certificates pane, control status, site health view pane, vEdge inventory pane, a vEdge health pane. I'm trying to think of the other ones. There's transport related ones. I think there's a transport interface distribution pane. Then there's a health pane. Top applications, if you want to see all the top applications. Yeah, there's the transport health, transport interface. Yeah, those are the two that I was trying to think of. And then the application aware routing pane. So it's kind of just like a general dashboard that gives you the opportunity to take a look at the overall health of your SD-WAN. You know, we see different menu options, different device panes, the certificates pane, like I mentioned. And you can click on those, by the way. Those are clickable components to go into the details for each of those. For example, if I go into the devices pane and I click on that, then I will be able to see the specific devices. This is the overall dashboard, like I said. If I were to click on the devices pane, that would take me into the devices pane. And that's the one that runs across the top of that dashboard screen. It's going to show you all of your control connections from the NMS to the vSmart controllers, the vEdge routers, the vBond orchestrators, everything that's in your overlay network, basically. It's going to display the status of the NMSs, if you have multiple NMSs, the total number of connections, the total number of up connections, down connections, and you can click on the number or the up-down arrow to look at different tables, and that gives you, kind of all the detailed information for each connection. And then every time you look at, or the status of the members change, that the screen is going to automatically refresh to provide that information. So it's kind of a real-time, it'll provide you all that real-time information. All right. Now, if I were to go back here and I was to click on the certificates pane, I would see the option of, all the details for the certificates, or what we call the reboot pane as well. That just shows you how many reboots happened in the last 24 hours for the devices in the network. Not the NMS itself, but the actual devices in the network. That's going to include things like cold reboots, soft reboots, power cycling devices, and so on. And if you click on the reboot pane, that opens up the reboot pop-up window, which gives you details, right? The IP address, the host name of the devices that rebooted, the time that the reboot occurred, the reason for a particular reboot. I mean, it's really simple, right? Provisioning is the difficult piece. Once everything is provisioned, and policy derivation is also probably pretty difficult as well. Deriving the policies that you're going to use based on your application aware specifics. Once that's all done, managing this is really, really simple. As you can see, it's kind of a point and click type of environment, right? You can also look at a crashes tab, which will identify if any device is crashed, what was the IP address and the host name of that device, what is the crash index number, different file related information. The certificates pane window that you see here gives you all the certificates that are on the controller devices. It shows a count of all the expired or invalid certificates in the system. And if you click on that pane, it'll bring up the details pop-up window, which again gives you all the specific IP address information, device information, where the certificates are installed, the actual certificate serial numbers, all the, certificate related details you'll get to see there. Okay. So again, really just very easy point and click management. Okay. Now, if I go back and I go back to the main one, we also see control status, which is this box right here, control status pane. And it tells you whether or not your vSmart or vEdge devices are connected to the vSmart controllers. Each vSmart controller has to connect to all the other vSmart controllers in the network, because these are kind of like your route reflectors, if you will. These are the ones that have to distribute all the information to the vEdge devices. So the vSmart controllers need to be able to communicate to each other. Each vEdge router then is connected to either one or multiple vSmart controllers in the network. So the control plane gives you 3 counts. It tells you the control up, which is the total number of devices with the required number of operational control plane connections to the vSmart controller. The partial, this is going to give you the total number of devices that have some but not all of their operational control plane connections to the vSmart controllers, and then the control down, which is basically devices that have no control plane connections to a vSmart controller. So that can be a pretty useful thing to note. Again, you can always kind of expand on this, and there's more details that you can see in that case. The next pane is the health pane. So if I, let me go back here to the main dashboard. So the site health pane, full connectivity, partial connectivity, no connectivity. So the site health pane gives you a state of all of the data connections. So if a site has, say, multiple vEdge routers, this is where we're going to see the state for that particular site, not the individual device, right? So full WAN connectivity, where all the BFD sessions on all the vEdge routers are in an up state. Partial WAN connectivity, where the TLOCs or tunnels are, some TLOCs or some tunnels are in a down state. Maybe there's limited data plane connectivity in this case, but we still have some connectivity. And then no connectivity means where all the BFD sessions on the edge routers, the vEdge routers, are in a down state, and there's no data plane connectivity at all. All right. So you can also click on more actions here to monitor the devices and so on. Again, you can kind of drill down into all of these. The next one we have, let's see what they have next here. Oh, the inventory plane. Pretty simple, right? 4 counts, total number of devices, so the total number of vEdge routers who have actually uploaded their configurations or uploaded their registration to the vManage server. That's going to include things like their serial numbers, etc. The authorized devices, so these are the authorized vEdge routers, but they're not completely, well, they may or may not be registered, right? It just depends on how you're provisioning those endpoints and what the current state is. Deployed is the total number of deployed vEdge routers. They're valid and they're operational, but they may not be completely deployed or completely integrated, I should say. And then we have our staging option, which shows us the vEdge routers that are presently in a staging state, right? We always configure routers to be in a staging state before we actually ship them to the branch location or the remote location. so that we can identify that they potentially will become part of the overlay network, but they're not provisioned yet. So they're not making any specific routing decisions, and they're not actually facilitating communication in that respect. Okay. All right. Let's see. We only have 11 of these to go through. So the next one is the transport interface distribution plane. This is tells us the interface usage. You can kind of see it listed here within the 24-hour window for vEdge interfaces in VPN 0. Now, I'm going to talk about the different VPNs later on. I don't want to get into that right now because that's not the purpose of this section here. But there are multiple VPNs, default VPNs that exist in this architecture. And we'll talk about what those the responsibility of those various VPNs are a little bit later on. So we also have our TLOC interfaces here, interface usage, and so on. And it describes kind of how we're distributing traffic over those different interfaces. All right. You'll get to play around with these when you get into the lab exercise and you get to start provisioning your SD-WAN. The vEdge health plane displays kind of an aggregated view, if you will, of all the routers, their states, how many vEdge routers are in that particular state. Basically describing the overall health of the hardware devices themselves. All right, so there are 3 states you can see here. The normal state would be routers with their memory, their hardware, their CPU in a normal state. Usually that means less than 70% of the total memory or total CPU. The warning state, anywhere from 70 to 90%, I believe it is. And then the error state means that more than 90% or just not functioning, that's going to get classified as an error. Again, this is a database that gets calculated within a 12 to 24-hour window, and it will update automatically or refresh automatically. And you can click the details. If you click on the normal box or normal circle here, you can see all the details of the devices in that state, the warning state. So all of these fields are clickable fields that allow you to kind of drill down and see what the specific endpoints are. The transport health pane, this is going to show us all the aggregated average loss. As the name implies, right? Transport health means the underlay, right? The transport links, right? Latency, jitter, and this could include specific link paths. So I could filter it based on the colors. Maybe it's an LTE to LTE connection or an LTE to 3G connection. And I can choose from the little drop down the type of loss here. You can kind of see it right there. The type is a selectable option. And you can select things like loss, latency, and jitter. And then you can apply filters for like time periods. And you can, again, expand on that if you want to see the details in that particular case. All right. The top application plane displays the CFlow data, basically information for traffic that's transiting the vEdge routers in your overlay. There's a DPI tab, and you can look at the different flows. You can do filters here. You can expand and look on specific information. And you can customize this to look at specific flows of information. The application-aware routing pane, this one is really just gives you an idea of the 10 worst tunnels, if you will, based on specific criteria that you specify from the type dropdown. You can see it again right here, that just on the right corner here, this type drop down, loss, jitter, latency, etc. If you choose loss, for example, it's going to show the 10 tunnels with the greatest average loss. We're talking about packet loss, right? If you choose jitter, the 10 with the most jitter, etc. And you can customize this as well. And you can say, for example, expand it to 25 tunnels or 15 tunnels or whatever. All right. You can see how if everything is set up correctly, at least physically configured correctly, this would be a very useful tool for managing the overall health of the WAN, right? As far as accessing devices, you can actually use the vEdge device list to get all the device details like reachability, what is the IP address of the device, what is the site ID, what is the current BFD state, what is the OMP state, and so on. You go into vManage NMS, into the dashboard screen. You click the up or down arrow in the vEdge device pane, which is located at the top of the screen. That's that one that goes kind of across the top of the screen. And then the vEdge device pop-up window opens, and then you can check the status or the reachability of a particular vEdge device. That's this device list that you see here. So BFD, OMP, all of these pieces we'll learn about as we kind of get into the implementation. IP address, the site ID. It's a vEdge router. These are virtual ones, vEdge clouds. So we would see the physical platform there, and so on. Chassis ID and the software version, and so on. All right. All right. Let's see what's next here. Different menu options. So accessing devices. If you click on the little elliptical button on the right, that's the 3 dots there, you actually see that you have a couple of different options, kind of sub-options, if you will. You can get real-time device information. You can SSH to the device to get command line access to that device. We'll talk about some of the command line options that you have later on to manage a device and so on. If you want to access SSH, you have that as well. We can use the SSH to access the device, and we can execute CLI commands. In this particular screen, we have a couple of different options as well. There's the top bar, right? The top bar, which is just on the left of the menu icon. That allows us to access the vManage menu, even though we're in an active SSH session. There's the title bar, which is at the top there, which indicates, basically the SSH terminal. And then we have a bunch of panes on the left, like a device group drop down to look at all the configured devices, search box, sort by drop down, list of SEN devices, and then we have our SSH window, which is just our open SSH window. We can change the size of that and so on, depending on what our requirements are. All right. Then the last thing that we'll see is kind of the final thing, which is the device dashboard. Let me switch my slide here. Now the device dashboard is where we view information about all the devices in the overlay. And as you can see kind of in that left vertical pane, the one that's highlighted in the red box, we can see all the information about the device. The DPI and CFlow flow information, status of the interfaces, TCP traffic information, TLOC and tunnel status, status and statistics for the control connections, reboot and crash information, hardware components, CPU and memory, syslog events, if we wanted to look at that, access control lists. There's some troubleshooting options that we see here as well, so we can do like pings and trace routes just to do basic layer 3 connectivity testing, and then real-time device information. And then as I click on these, obviously the screen is going to change, but we have a lot of options here to manage the devices individually. All right. Let's see, where did my mouse go? There it is. Okay. If we go into the interface pane, so this is just an example of kind of going into one of those specific options. We click on the interface on the left. This is what's going to show up. And you can see things like IPv4 and IPv6 information, all the graphical information about the interface. We can apply filters here. We can look at the first 6 interfaces of a device, or I think you can see up to 30 interfaces at a time in this bottom right pane here. But and then we can see different Ethernet interfaces, cellular interfaces, and so on. If I decide to go to control connections, which is this option right here, these are just some examples, right? We see things like vBond Orchestrator, vManage NMS, Smart Controller, and then all of these are clickable options, by the way. What are the actual number of connections versus what are the expected number of connections? What are the control connections in a graphical format? If I have multiple interfaces, NMS graphical topology information. Again, the ability to filter this information as well, search. You know, you're going to get a chance to play around with this in the lab. I suggest when you get into the lab environment that you do play around with it, that you kind of click through the different options and see what you see, to see how it relates to what you're trying to manage or what you're trying to configure. All right. So that's just a kind of a summary of all the dashboards that you're going to see in this particular environment.
Yeah,
so that finishes up this lesson. Actually, it finishes up this module. So we're going to do a quick lesson review. We talked about the web browser used for accessing and logging into vManage. We looked at all the different dashboard displays, all the different panes to manage our devices, the state of the devices, our transport network health, and information about the overlay network itself. We also looked at how we can monitor different interfaces, different control connections, the status of different elements within the system itself, and all the different dashboards. So that wraps up this module. We did a lot in this module, actually. There's 5 different modules that we go through. This is just the first one. You know, we talked about SDN. You know, what is SDN? What are the different components? You know, how do we get that separation from the data plane and the control plane? What is the virtual fabric? We talked about the different components to build the overlay network. What is hardware versus software-based components, vEdge routers, controller components, and so on. We talked about the NMS, the web-based application, and how can we see visibility into the network and so on. So what I'd like to do is go through a couple of different kind of module review questions, if you will, and see if we can you know, make sure that we were able to kind of verify what it is that we did, right? So the first question is, select the parts of the secure extensible network, choose 3, right? And in this case, clearly the automation pane is not part of that, right? We have the control plane, we have the management plane, and we have the data plane, right? And there's no such really thing as the automation. We have the orchestration piece, but which provides automation, but it's not called the automation plane. All right. Which choices are benefits of the virtual IP fabric centralized policy? Choose 3. The ability to influence transport link choice based on SLAs. That sounds about right. Automatic mapping of business logic to transport links. That sounds about right. Centralized services such as firewall and IDS, or faster reaction to planned and unexpected situations. So that's a challenge, because we did talk about services as being an option, right? But when we talk about services as being an option, it's not really the firewall and IPS or IDS services, although that could be included. I'm trying to think what the best possible answer would be here. I would actually say that C and D would be correct because there are firewall services that you can include. There are IDS services that you can include. But also D would be correct as well, right? Faster reaction to planned and unexpected situations. This is kind of one of those situations where you get a kind of a generic question. So I would say out of all of these, I would pick A, C, and D in this particular case. The ability to influence transport links based on SLA, which is kind of what B is, but B is kind of a more generic way of saying it, I guess. Mapping your business logic to your transport links. Business logic would be what is the service level components that you want to include, right? So I would say A, C, and D in this particular case. True or false? The vSmart distributes the list of vBond and vManage devices to all the vEdge routers. The vSmart distributes a list of all the vBond and vManage devices to all of the vEdge routers. Does that sound like what it does? No, it's not what the purpose is. The vEdge devices do not. The vEdge routers don't need to know where all the vBond and vManage devices are. They just need to be able to get their configuration and register, right? So that would be false in this case. Do you agree with that?
I do, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right. Let's see. Question number 4. Select the functions of the vEdge router. Choose 3. It establishes a secure control plane with remote vEdge routers. No, the control plane piece goes to vSmart, right? Not vEdge to vEdge. Implements control plane policies and such as service chaining, multi-topology, and multi-hop. Yeah, I would say that's true, right? The vEdge router is the one that implements the policies. We define the policies from the vSmart controller, but it's the one that's responsible for implementing them. It does definitely use traditional routing like OSPF, BGP, and VRRP. And it does provide secure data plane connectivity to other vEdge routers. So the in that case, I would. I'm just trying to think about B here, whether B would be correct or not versus A. The book says A is correct, and I'm not quite sure why that would be in this particular case. I could see how B could not be correct. Definitely C and D are absolutely correct. But establishes a secure control plane with remote vEdge routers. That to me is a function of vSmart, but I'm not sure why they're defining that as a function of vEdge. vEdge to vEdge, that's the whole point. We're separating that control plane function from the data plane functionality. So I'm not quite sure why they selected that as one of the choices, but we'll go with that. Let's see. Question number 5. Which are panes that are displayed in the main VM dashboard? Device pane, definitely. Site health pane. And control status pane. That's pretty straightforward. And then question number 6. Which categories of information can be monitored from the device dashboard? Application, control connections, routing protocol, system status. Certainly control connections and system status. Application, yes, in what we were talking about, that application aware routing. That's what they're referencing in that particular case. So yeah, that would be correct. We don't really see any specifics about the routing protocols themselves because that's kind of irrelevant, right? The routing protocol is on the LAN side, not the WAN side. So we're not really concerned specifically about the routing protocols. All right. All right. So that wraps up that lesson. That also wraps up that module. We'll see you guys in the next module.